Hello and welcome to another amazing part of What If Shadow Was More Tech-Focused? Terra Ace wrote this amazing story. Please support them. Don't forget to like, sub, and leave a comment. Now let's dive in. The night air was heavy, the viscosity of industrial water running from the nearby pipe and mingling with the acrid tang of industrial waste. Beneath the pale glow of a crescent moon, the facility loomed ahead, an aging structure hidden in plain sight. Rusted fences and forgotten signage gave it the appearance of a decommissioned transport hub, but Umbra 03's analysis told a different story. This was an old supply tunnel, an entry point into the cult's labyrinthine stronghold. Minoru crouched low, his patched-together armor blending into the shadows. His rudimentary suit felt stiff yet functional, layers of scavenged leather over salvaged plating offering modest protection. The boots on his feet made no noise as he rested nearby the pipe, hidden from the guards. His baton rested at his hip, ready to spring to life, and the crowbar hung loosely in his grip, a tool and a weapon all in one. "This is it," he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. The reports from Delta and the drone data painted a clear picture of the facility's vulnerabilities. The entrance ahead saw little traffic these days and security was minimal, a perfect weak point. Checkpoint, the first gate. A pair of guards stood lazily by the gate, their attention split between a flickering monitor and the coffee cups steaming in their hands. The security protocols were lax here. This wasn't the cult's shining jewel but a forgotten cog in the machine. Minoru's approach was silent, each step calculated. He slipped past the outer cameras, easily bypassed due to the report showing several blind spots in its surveillance. The guards never saw him coming. With a flick of his baton, Minoru activated its EMP function, a soft hum building as he lunged forward. One swift strike to the first guard's chest sent a crackling shock through the man's body, dropping him instantly. The second guard barely had time to react before the crowbar came down on his weapon, knocking it to the ground. Minoru followed up with a precise strike to the man's temple, leaving him unconscious. The gate's console blinked at him, demanding a keycard. A quick search of the guards revealed one clipped to a belt. "Convenient," he muttered, swiping it through the reader. The gate creaked open, revealing the tunnel beyond. Location: the tunnel. The air grew colder as Minoru ventured deeper into the tunnel. The walls were lined with exposed piping and faintly glowing runes etched into the concrete, a hallmark of the cult's bizarre integration of technology and mysticism. Each step brought him closer to the sector's main supply point, a checkpoint with poorly guarded materials and outdated systems. According to the reports, this was his chance to upgrade his gear and prepare for the challenges ahead. The temporary workshop. The checkpoint was a small guard station converted from an old storage depot. It was ill-maintained, with supplies strewn across tables and dusty shelves. Minoru wasted no time securing the area, ensuring no other patrols were nearby. He scavenged quickly. Armor upgrades. A few intact pieces of the guard's armor were repurposed, reinforcing his suit with heavier plating on the shoulders and chest. Energy cells. Cracked open from decommissioned weapons, the cells were unstable but serviceable, fueling the last remnants of his gear. Magnetic boots. Hidden beneath a pile of scrap, the boots were a rare find. Testing their functionality, Minoru grinned as the boots allowed him to scale metallic surfaces effortlessly, an advantage he hadn't expected to regain. "Not perfect," he murmured, strapping the last piece of armor to his forearm, "but it'll do." The interior was dimly lit, a relic of another era. Dust-coated monitors flickered weakly, and outdated equipment buzzed with intermittent life. Minoru moved through the space methodically, scanning for anything else that was usable. On a decrepit workbench, he found an old handheld welder, its casing battered but functional. Nearby, a crate of outdated military gear yielded a small haul, a cracked visor with rudimentary night vision capabilities, a reinforced chest plate that would offer better protection than his patched leather, and spare battery packs compatible with his jury-rigged systems. He worked quickly, adapting the chest plate to his existing suit. The welder proved invaluable in making the adjustments, its small flame hissing as it fused metal to leather. With the visor secured, he activated its night vision mode, and a faint green hue washed over the dim room. "Not bad," he muttered, testing the fit of his upgraded gear. Before leaving, Minoru rummaged through the station's database, a terminal sputtering to life under his touch. It was slow, ancient, and barely functional, but he managed to extract a crude map of the tunnel system ahead. Marked on the map were several power nodes, coolant lines, and critical junctions, key areas he would exploit. The tunnel stretched before him, dark and foreboding. With the station's outdated map loaded into his newly acquired and refurbished visor, Minoru moved cautiously. The old infrastructure provided plenty of cover, piles of unused equipment, forgotten crates, and crumbling walls. As he advanced, the tunnel's neglect became apparent. Pipes leaked foul-smelling steam, and wires hung loosely, sparking intermittently. Patrols were infrequent and poorly coordinated, their routes predictable. Minoru used the terrain to his advantage, ambushing guards and pilfering their gear. From one patrol, he salvaged a compact utility knife and a small toolkit. Another yielded an insulated glove, perfect for handling live wires. Each encounter strengthened his arsenal bit by bit, turning his rudimentary equipment into something more formidable. Sector Alpha 7 under. The power generator's coolant cables. Hours of careful navigation brought him to the sector housing the main power source. The air grew colder, the temperature dropping noticeably as he neared the coolant cables. Massive pipes snaked along the walls and ceiling, their surfaces frosted over with condensation. The room was cavernous, illuminated by the faint glow of emergency lights. The cables, thick and pulsing with energy, were embedded into reinforced walls. The hum of machinery reverberated through the space, a low, steady drone that spoke of immense power. Minoru crouched behind a console, surveying the area. The defenses here were slightly more robust. Motion sensors lined the walls and a pair of guards stood near the cables. They were better equipped than the others he'd encountered, their armor bulkier, their movements more alert. He studied the environment, his mind racing with plans. The coolant cables were critical to destabilizing the power core. Severing them would initiate a cascade effect, forcing the system into a dangerous state. But he couldn't afford to alert the guards prematurely. "Time to get creative," he murmured, activating the welder he'd scavenged earlier. He slipped the insulated glove onto one hand and prepared his approach, the faint glow of his visor illuminating his path. The mission was far from over, but he was closer than ever to striking a decisive blow against the cult. Minoru reached the base of a nearby console, examining its outdated panel. With the insulated glove, he carefully pried open the casing and exposed the wires inside. The console was still functional enough for his purposes. He twisted a few connections, causing the screen to flicker erratically. A high-pitched beep followed, then another. Within seconds, the console began to spark and whine loudly. One guard said, his voice cutting through the mechanical hum. He motioned to the console. "Go check it out." The second guard nodded, stepping cautiously toward the flashing screen. Minoru used the distraction to move closer, his baton already in hand. The guard inspecting the console leaned forward, muttering curses as he fiddled with the controls. He didn't notice Minoru until it was too late. A swift strike to the back of the head sent him sprawling silently to the ground. The remaining guards spun around, rifle raised, but Minoru was already closing the distance. The rifle fired once, the shot ricocheting off the walls, before Minoru's crowbar hooked around the barrel, yanking it downward. A brutal follow-up strike with the baton dropped the second guard. Minoru quickly dragged the unconscious guards behind the large pipes, binding their hands with zip ties scavenged earlier. With the area secured, Minoru turned his attention to the massive coolant pipes. Frost coated the surfaces, and the air was frigid, each breath leaving a visible mist. He crouched near the base of one cable, examining the connections and searching for a vulnerable point. The welder buzzed to life in his hand, its orange glow illuminating the cold, metallic surface. He worked methodically, slicing through the reinforced casing that shielded the coolant flow. The first cable hissed as it ruptured, spraying freezing liquid into the air. Minoru recoiled, shielding his visor from the mist as he moved to the next cable. He repeated the process, his movements precise despite the rising tension. Each severed cable sent vibrations through the system, and the hum of the power core grew erratic. Alarms began to blare in the distance, subtle at first but growing louder with each passing second. Sector Alpha 7 under. Complications. Minoru had just finished severing the third and final cable when a new noise reached his ears. The sound of boots against metal. Reinforcements. "Damn it," he muttered, stowing the welder and gripping his baton and crowbar. He retreated into the shadows, positioning himself behind a large pipe. Moments later, a squad of 4 heavily armed guards entered the room, their flashlights sweeping across the machinery. "The coolant lines are down," one barked, his voice sharp with urgency. "Find the intruder." Minoru's mind raced. He couldn't afford to let them reactivate the system. The longer the cooling system remained offline, the closer the core would edge toward meltdown. Using his magnetic boots, he scaled a nearby wall, positioning himself above the squad. The boots hissed softly as they clung to the metal, but the guards didn't notice. From his vantage point, Minoru timed his attack. He released the boot's grip, dropping onto the closest guard. The impact sent the man sprawling, his rifle clattering to the floor. The remaining guards reacted quickly, raising their weapons, but Minoru was already moving. He swept his crowbar into the legs of the nearest enemy, toppling him, and followed up with a baton strike that discharged a small EMP pulse, disabling the guard's armor systems. A rifle fired, the shot grazing Minoru's shoulder and leaving a searing line of pain. He bit back a grunt, spinning to face the shooter. The crowbar arced through the air, slamming into the rifle's barrel and wrenching it aside. The final guard hesitated, his flashlight trembling as he aimed at Minoru. But the delay was fatal. Minoru closed the distance with a leap, delivering a brutal strike to the guard's chest that sent him crumpling to the ground. The room was quiet once more, save for the blaring alarms and the hiss of ruptured coolant pipes. Minoru's breathing was heavy, his shoulder aching where the shot had grazed him. He activated his visor, scanning the room for any additional threats. Satisfied that no more reinforcements were inbound, he made his way to the exit, his movements deliberate but quick. As he stepped into the adjoining corridor, a deep rumble echoed through the base. The coolant failure was taking its toll on the power core, destabilizing the system. He smirked, the sound a small victory in the chaos. Ahead of him, the map in his visor highlighted the path to his next objective. He tightened his grip on his weapons and moved forward, ready for whatever came next. Sector Alpha 7. Descent into Chaos. The alarms grew louder as Minoru pressed deeper into the cult's sprawling base. The corridor ahead was dimly lit, the flickering emergency lights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The vibrations from the destabilizing power core reverberated through the floor, a constant reminder of his sabotage and its growing impact. Minoru paused to catch his breath, leaning against a cold metal wall. His shoulder still ached from the graze, but the pain was less severe than he expected. He flexed his fingers experimentally, surprised by the rapid return of strength. "Guess adrenaline's kicking in," he muttered, pushing himself upright. He couldn't afford to slow down, not with the base's defenses scrambling to recover. As Minoru moved, subtle changes began to occur within him. The gash on his shoulder, though still visible, had stopped bleeding entirely. The bruises from earlier skirmishes faded slightly, the tender skin regaining its usual resilience. His breathing, which had been labored, became steady. He chalked it up to his training and experience. Years of honing his body had taught him how to push through exhaustion and pain. Yet, deep within his core, Aurora's energy stirred, weaving through his cells and mending them at an unnatural rate. He didn't notice how the very slight limp from a healed twisted ankle was gone, or how the cuts along his knuckles had sealed without scabbing. Sector Alpha 7. Storage Depot. Ahead, the corridor opened into a large chamber filled with storage crates and scattered debris. It looked like a supply depot, hastily abandoned in the chaos. Rifles and body armor lay discarded, and a few terminals blinked with residual power from emergency circuits. Minoru stepped cautiously into the room, his visor scanning for movement. As he approached one of the terminals, a noise behind him made him freeze, a faint metallic scrape like a blade being drawn. He turned just in time to see two figures emerging from the shadows. They were cult enforcers, clad in black tactical suits reinforced with segmented armor. Their movements were fluid and deliberate, their gazes cold behind their visors. Minoru noticed that they had what looked like compact rifles that glowed on their hips, probably something experimental that the cult issued their better soldiers and operatives. "You're a persistent one," one of them said, their voice distorted by a modulator. "But this is as far as you go." Minoru didn't respond. Instead, he gripped his crowbar and baton tightly, assessing his opponents. These weren't the usual grunts. Their stances were precise, their weapons sleek and high-tech. The first enforcer lunged, swinging a curved blade aimed at Minoru's midsection. Minoru sidestepped, using his magnetic boots to anchor himself briefly to a metal crate before delivering a counterstrike with his baton. The blow landed on the enforcer's armor, sending a crackling EMP pulse through their suit. The enforcer staggered but didn't go down, their armor absorbing much of the impact. The second enforcer fired a volley of energy rounds from a compact rifle. Minoru dove behind a crate, the shots sizzling as they struck the metal. He rolled to his feet, grabbing a discarded rifle from the floor. The weapon felt unfamiliar in his hands, but he squeezed the trigger, sending a burst of projectiles toward his attacker. The enforcers dodged, the rounds grazing their armor but not penetrating. They moved in sync, one closing the distance while the other provided covering fire. Minoru waited for the right moment, letting them think he was pinned. When the first enforcer closed in, blade raised, Minoru used his athletic abilities, launching himself slightly to the side and then upward and grabbing onto an overhead crate hook. The enforcer's blade sliced through empty air. From his hook, Minoru dropped onto the enforcer, slamming the crowbar into the back of their helmet. The enforcer collapsed, their suits sparking as its systems overloaded. The second enforcer hesitated for a fraction of a second, their aim faltering. It was all Minoru needed. He hurled the baton, its EMP charge activating mid-air. The device struck the enforcer's rifle, disabling it and forcing them to engage in close combat. Minoru closed the distance, his crowbar clashing against the enforcer's armored forearms. They traded blows, the enforcer's strikes precise but predictable. Minoru's movements were faster, more fluid, as if his body were reacting instinctively. With a final swing, Minoru caught the enforcer's helmet, the impact cracking the visor and sending them sprawling to the ground. The room fell silent except for the hum of machinery and the distant alarms. Minoru took a moment to recover, his breathing steady despite the intense fight. His visor guided him to a set of reinforced doors at the far end of the chamber. They hissed open as he approached, revealing the coolant core. Massive cables snaked across the floor, connecting to a central pillar that pulsed with a faint blue glow. Frost clung to the walls, the air frigid. The core was the lifeline of the base, regulating the systems that kept the cult's infrastructure stable. Minoru approached cautiously, scanning the area for traps or reinforcements. His visor highlighted key points on the cables where sabotage would be most effective. "Time to cut the lifeline," he murmured, activating his welder. As the welder's glow illuminated the room, a faint warmth spread through his body, banishing the chill. Aurora's energy pulsed faintly within him, repairing unseen wounds and readying him for the battles to come. Unaware of the true source of his renewed strength, Minoru focused on his task, determined to bring the cult's base to its knees. The welder's soft hiss filled the chamber as Minoru methodically worked on the coolant cables. Sparks danced in the dim light, and frost melted away in rivulets, only to refreeze moments later. The hum of the coolant core seemed louder now, its vibrations pulsing through the room like the heartbeat of the base itself. Minoru adjusted his grip on the welder, his movements precise. The cables were thick and reinforced, designed to withstand extreme conditions. But Minoru wasn't trying to sever them entirely, yet. He carefully scored the insulation, weakening the most critical junctions. When the time came to destroy the core, the damage would cascade catastrophically. Each stroke of the welder heightened his focus. This was the culmination of all his planning, his struggles, his pain. He wasn't just dismantling the cult's power base, he was striking at the heart of everything they represented. A low rumble shook the chamber. Minoru froze, his eyes darting to the door. Footsteps. Heavy, measured, and accompanied by muffled voices. "Check the core chamber," one voice said, stern and commanding. "If he's here, we corner him." Minoru extinguished the welder and slipped into the shadows, his darkened suit blending with the frost-coated walls. He crouched low behind a set of coolant pipes, his breathing steady despite the tension. 3 operatives entered the room, their suits bulkier than the ones Minoru had encountered earlier. They carried energy rifles, their visors glowing faintly in the dim light. Each step they took was deliberate, their training evident in their cautious movements. "He's been moving fast," one of them said, scanning the room. "Half the base is in chaos. And if we don't stop him, the other half will be too," another replied. Minoru gripped his crowbar tightly, considering his options. His visor's HUD highlighted the operatives, tagging their weak points, unarmored joints, exposed weapon cables, and vulnerable visors. One of the operatives stepped closer to his hiding spot, their rifle sweeping side to side. Minoru waited until they were nearly past him, then struck. With a burst of speed, he slammed the crowbar into the operative's knee joint. The armor buckled under the force and the operative collapsed with a pained grunt. Before the others could react, Minoru lunged for the second, jabbing his baton into their rifle's power source. The EMP discharge disabled the weapon and sent the operative reeling. The third operative turned, firing a burst of energy rounds. Minoru ducked, the shots grazing the wall behind him and leaving scorch marks on the frost. He activated his magnetic boots, propelling himself forward and closing the distance. A swift strike with the crowbar disarmed the final operative, and a follow-up blow to their helmet sent them crumpling to the ground. Minoru exhaled, glancing at the fallen operatives to ensure they were incapacitated. He retrieved their rifles, stripping them for parts and adding the power cells to his utility belt. He could always rig them to explode using the welder and some wire. Useful, he muttered, tucking away the components. Returning to the coolant cables, he resumed his work, moving faster now. The commotion had undoubtedly alerted more guards, and he couldn't afford to linger. The welder hissed as it cut deeper into the cables, the coolant fluid inside beginning to leak. A faint mist filled the room, the freezing vapor creating an almost ghostly atmosphere. The next critical point was the power regulators, a series of backup systems designed to mitigate the damage from any sabotage. He slipped through the chamber's rear exit, moving deeper into the labyrinthine base. The halls were eerily quiet, the usual hum of machinery subdued by his earlier disruptions. As he approached the regulator chamber, he noticed something strange. The air felt heavier, charged with an almost electrical tension. Faint whispers echoed through the corridor, indistinct and haunting. Just the base's systems malfunctioning, he muttered, shaking off the unease. The regulator chamber was larger than he anticipated, its walls lined with conduits and control panels. Massive turbines dominated the center, their blades spinning sluggishly. Minoru approached cautiously, his visor scanning for threats. His HUD highlighted several weak points: junction boxes, coolant valves, and power conduits. "Time to bring this place down," he said, gripping his crowbar. He had a general idea on how they connected and intersected with each other. But first, he primed his power core explosive to the main power turbine control panel. An explosion of this magnitude would sever not only the functionality, but also create a chain reaction, causing absolute chaos to the base locations that depended on these turbines' power output. Now, Minoru grinned, excited at what was coming next. Time to have some fun. Unbeknownst to Minoru, his actions had not gone unnoticed. In the depths of the base, the cult's elder council watched the unfolding chaos through grainy security feeds. "He's targeting the regulators now," one elder said, their voice tinged with frustration. "If he succeeds, the backup systems won't activate in time." "Deploy reinforcements," another commanded. "And send a message to Olivier. She'll want to deal with him personally." The elders exchanged uneasy glances. The intruder was more resourceful than they had anticipated, and their carefully laid plans were unraveling. But they still had their trump card, the weapon at the core of the base. All over the base, many reactions were taking place. All around the perimeter, a hunter begins his hunt. The exhausted technician. Deep in the dimly lit auxiliary power station, a technician furiously tapped on a console, sweat beading on his forehead. "We need more time to sync the backups. Where are the soldiers?" His voice cracked as the status lights flickered erratically, an ominous sign of the damage spreading through the base. Before he could issue another command, the sound of faint, deliberate footsteps echoed from the corridor behind him. The technician turned, heart pounding. Shadows danced across the wall as if alive. Then silence. Moments later, the lights cut out entirely, and a dull thud signaled the technician slumping to the floor. When the emergency lights flickered on, the workstation was empty. The cables leading to the console were severed cleanly, and the technician's crowbar rested against the wall, a silent, mocking message. The rookie patrol. In the barracks near the cooling conduit sector, a pair of rookie soldiers gripped their weapons tightly, eyes darting nervously. "Did you hear that?" one whispered, peering into the darkness of the adjacent corridor. "Stop jumping at shadows," the other hissed, though his hands trembled. "This is just another drill gone wrong." "Right." A sudden clang echoed, the sound bouncing chaotically. Both soldiers spun, rifles at the ready. "Who's there?" the first shouted. A faint shimmer in the gloom was their only warning before one soldier was yanked backward into the shadows. His muffled scream cut off abruptly. The second soldier panicked, firing wildly into the void. When he ran out of ammunition, the corridor was silent once more. Panicking, the second soldier forgot his courage and dropped his weapon, a useless heavy thing now, and ran away, leaving his partner behind like a coward. Only footsteps fading away remained. The scientist's dilemma. Dr. Ilara Voss slammed her palms on the table in the main laboratory. "We have to shut everything down now. The feedback from the cooling systems is destabilizing the core's containment fields." "No," her colleague snapped. "The council ordered us to maintain the primary systems at all costs. Do you want to face them if this fails?" Dr. Voss swallowed hard, glancing at the trembling junior scientists nearby. "If we don't shut it down, this whole sector will collapse. We're not trained for this level of sabotage." Before an argument could erupt, the lab's emergency lock engaged with a harsh hiss, trapping everyone inside. The last thing they saw before the power cut entirely was a visor's glow staring at them from the ventilation shaft above. Minoru's progress. The path forward became increasingly treacherous. Minoru moved like a ghost through the chaos, his form darting between cover. Every movement felt smoother, his reflexes sharper. He dismissed the slight tingling warmth that surged through his body as adrenaline, unaware that Aurora's lingering energy was actively mending his wounds and boosting his stamina. Finding another security station, Minoru disassembled an elite guard's discarded armor plating and incorporated it into his own suit. The enhancements offered slightly more protection against small arms fire, though the armor still showed signs of wear after his earlier skirmishes. He continued his hunt, dogmatic at cleaning out the cult's power. He hasn't had this much fun since taking out all those street gangs. The rookie guard. Private Dane's hands trembled as he gripped his rifle, the pale green glow of his visor illuminating the narrow hallway. The explosions from earlier still echoed in his ears, and the power outage plunged the facility into an eerie semi-darkness. The only sound was his own ragged breathing and the faint hum of emergency lights. "Sector 7 secure," he muttered into his radio, though his voice quavered. A flicker of movement caught his eye. "Who's there?" he barked, spinning toward the shadowed corner. The beam of his flashlight swept across empty crates and maintenance tools, but no one was there. The silence pressed on him. Then click. A faint sound, metal on metal. Dane's heart raced. Before he could react, a shadow loomed behind him. In one fluid motion, a crowbar hooked around the rifle, yanking it from his hands. Dane turned, raising his fists, but a sharp blow from a baton struck his visor. The world went black as he crumpled to the floor. The frantic scientist, Dr. Corvin, sprinted down the corridor, clutching a tablet to his chest. The files on Project Epsilon were too valuable to lose. If the council found out he abandoned his post without securing them, his fate would be worse than the interloper's wrath. Sweat poured down his face as he reached the lab door, fumbling for his keycard. His hands were slick, trembling too much to fit it into the reader. Come on," he hissed. The air shifted behind him, a faint rustle, barely audible. He froze. Slowly he turned his head. A glowing green visor attached to a being in pure black stared back from the darkness. The crowbar struck the keycard reader, smashing it in one blow and sealing the lab. Corvin screamed, dropping the tablet, but a swift kick sent it skidding away. He backed into the wall, shaking. "You don't have to kill me," he begged, raising his hands, hoping, praying that his life would be spared. The figure didn't speak. Instead, the baton's crackling tip struck the wall beside Corvin's head, sparking with electricity. The scientist collapsed in terror, unconscious from the shock of fear itself. The elite soldier. Sergeant Kale surveyed the carnage in the barracks. Overturned beds, broken lockers, unconscious rookies sprawled across the floor. The interloper was no amateur. He activated his comm. Sector 5 compromised. Deploy reinforcements. The static-laced response was faint. Negative, forces spread too thin. You're on your own, Sergeant. Kale smirked grimly, drawing his sidearm and flipping the safety off. Perfect. Just the way I like it. The sergeant advanced cautiously, scanning every shadow. He knew the interloper was close. This wasn't chaos. It was a calculated strike. The faint hum of a drone caught his ear. Kale spun, firing a precise shot. The bullet clipped the small device, sending it spiraling to the ground. He smirked, but the sound distracted him long enough for a figure to lunge from above, landing behind him. Kale pivoted, swinging his rifle like a club, but the interloper ducked, striking his knee with the baton. Kale dropped to one leg, gritting his teeth in pain as he raised his gun again, but it was too late. The crowbar knocked it aside, and the next blow sent him sprawling. Kale groaned, staring up at the ceiling. The interloper crouched over him, retrieving the data drive from his tactical vest before disappearing into the shadows. Damn it. Kale muttered before losing consciousness, a swift strike to the head by the crowbar causing it. The terrified research assistant. Marla hid under a desk in the archive room, her hands clamped over her mouth. She had seen the security feed. The interloper had taken down an entire squad like they were nothing. The lights flickered overhead, the hum of the damaged generator casting eerie shadows across the walls. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Slow, deliberate. Marla's breath hitched. She prayed he wouldn't check this room. She prayed harder when the footsteps stopped just outside the door. The door creaked open and a pair of boots entered. The figure paused, scanning the room. Marla squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself invisible. The silence stretched unbearably long before, clang. The crowbar struck the desk above her, the sound reverberating through her skull. She screamed, crawling out from beneath it, hands raised. "I don't know anything important," she cried. "I just file the data." The interloper tilted his head, studying her for a moment. Then, without a word, he turned and began searching the terminals. Marla didn't wait to see what he wanted. She bolted for the door, not daring to look back. The command console. In the archive room, Minoru hunched over the massive console, his fingers flying over the keyboard. The schematics were complex, but the data was invaluable. He smirked as he encrypted the files and began uploading them to Akane's computer back home. The sound of heavy boots approaching the console room snapped him out of his focus. He glanced at the timer, just enough time to finish the upload and wipe the system clean. A group of guards burst in, rifles trained on him. "Surrender," one shouted. Minoru raised his baton, activating the magnetic boots he had scavenged. He leaped onto the console's metal frame, avoiding their initial volley of fire. The boots clung tightly to the steel as he maneuvered above them, dropping down with a sweeping blow that disarmed one guard. Using the fallen soldier's weapon, he threw it into the console, sparking an overload. The guards hesitated, their fear overtaking their training. The upload beeped, complete. Minoru yanked the hard drive free, his crowbar smashing the final bits of data storage to prevent any traceable links. He exited through a maintenance duct as the console erupted in sparks behind him, the guards too disoriented to pursue. Each encounter left the cult more fractured and desperate, their soldiers demoralized, their researchers terrified, and their once untouchable base in shambles. Minoru pressed onward, the shadows his ally and chaos his weapon. The barracks collapse. The barracks were eerily quiet, the air thick with tension. A squad of soldiers patrolled the dimly lit corridors, their faces grim. After hearing about the interlopers' attacks, fear spread like wildfire among the ranks. Corporal Lai led the group, his hands gripping his rifle tightly. "Stay sharp. He's just one guy. We outnumber him 20 to 1, he said, though his voice betrayed his own uncertainty. A metallic clang echoed from the far end of the hallway. The squad turned in unison, rifles aimed. Lai signaled for two of them to check it out. The pair cautiously approached the noise, sweeping their flashlights across crates and overturned beds. "Nothing here," one muttered, turning back. Then the lights flickered. "Behind you," someone shouted, but it was too late. The interloper dropped from the ceiling, his baton striking one soldier squarely in the chest. The other swung his rifle, but a well-placed kick disarmed him. The squad opened fire, but the interloper disappeared into the shadows. Their bullets ricocheted off the metal walls, adding to the chaos. Suddenly, smoke grenades rolled into the corridor, filling it with a choking haze. The interloper re-emerged, weaving through the disoriented soldiers. One by one they fell, either knocked unconscious or rendered incapable of fighting. Lai coughed, swinging his rifle wildly. "Show yourself, coward." A voice whispered from the smoke, low and chilling. "You're out of time." The last thing Lai saw was the glowing baton arcing toward him. The failed reinforcement team. Captain Voss was livid. "What do you mean the barracks are compromised?" he shouted into his comm. "We've lost contact with Squad Ada, sir," came the panicked reply. "We're regrouping." A clang. A grunt of pain. The line went dead. Voss snarled, signaling his team of elite soldiers to move out. These were no rookies. They were seasoned operatives trained for high-threat engagements. "Secure the generator room," he ordered. "If we restore power, we can flush him out." The team moved in formation, their movements precise and silent. As they approached the generator room, Voss noticed the door was ajar. He motioned for his men to spread out. Inside, the destruction was worse than he imagined. The generator was beyond repair, sparking and smoking. Nearby, several unconscious guards lay in a heap, their weapons dismantled. "Set up a perimeter," Voss commanded. But as his team moved into position, the interloper struck. A drone zipped past, its faint hum drawing attention. Two soldiers turned to fire, but the distraction allowed the interloper to strike from above, dropping onto one and using him as a shield. Voss aimed his sidearm, but the interloper was too fast. He rolled into cover, his magnetic boots allowing him to cling to the wall. With a precise throw, a crowbar knocked Voss's gun from his hand. "Take him down," Voss shouted, but his men were already falling. The interloper's agility and use of the terrain made him nearly untouchable. The fight ended with Voss lying on the floor, staring up at the interloper. His baton hummed menacingly, but instead of delivering a final blow, the interloper simply snatched the captain's encrypted keycard and disappeared into the shadows. Voss cursed before heading back to the safe perimeter they established earlier, wary of the shadows. The deathly afraid scientist team. Dr. Malin was sweating bullets. The lab was supposed to be the safest place in the facility, but now it felt like a death trap. She and her colleagues huddled around their workstations, frantically transferring data to secure servers. "Hurry up," Malin hissed. The emergency lights flickered, casting long shadows across the room. A sudden crash made everyone jump. "What was that?" someone whispered. Malin spun around, her heart pounding. The door was still closed, but the noise had come from within the room. "Check the vents," she said, her voice shaking. Before anyone could move, a drone dropped from the ceiling, its laser cutting through the main server's power cables. Sparks flew and the room plunged into darkness. Panic erupted as the interloper emerged from the shadows. The scientists scattered, but Malin stayed frozen, clutching a tablet filled with critical data. The interloper approached, his visor glowing faintly. He snatched the tablet from her hands, smashing it against the wall. "Please no," Malin begged. He didn't respond. Instead, he placed a small device on the main console. Moments later, it detonated, destroying the last of their work. Malin collapsed to her knees, watching helplessly as the interloper disappeared. The core corridor. The cult's forces were in disarray. Soldiers patrolled aimlessly, scientists abandoned their workstations, and officers barked orders to no avail. Minoru navigated through the chaos, his night vision visor allowing him to see clearly in the dimly lit corridors. He approached a heavily guarded checkpoint, the final barrier before the core. Using his last drone, he created a diversion, sending it skittering down a side hallway. The guards pursued it, leaving the main entrance unguarded. Minoru slipped inside, his movements precise and silent. The core chamber loomed ahead, its massive doors sealed shut. Minoru finally reached the entrance to the core. The massive steel door loomed before him, its surface adorned with glowing sigils that pulsed like a heartbeat. Beyond it lay the cult's most sacred chamber, the culmination of their twisted ambitions. But he wasn't alone. Leaning casually against the doorframe, sword at her side, was Olivier. "You've made quite the mess," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. Minoru stepped forward, his baton spinning in his hand. His armor, patched together from salvaged parts, gleamed faintly in the dim light. "I was wondering where you were, almost started to miss you," he replied, smirking. His voice steady and carefree. Olivier straightened, her golden eyes, that was new, weren't they blue or blue-green? Locking onto his. "Good. I've been waiting for this." The two stared each other down, the tension between them palpable. Somewhere in the distance, alarms blared, and the cult's forces scrambled to regain control. But here, at the threshold of destiny, it was just Minoru and Olivier. She was clad in sleek combat gear, her knife gleaming in the faint light. Her eyes locked onto him, a mix of respect, anger, and determination. Minoru tightened his grip on his baton, his heart pounding with anticipation. The core chamber buzzed with tension, the hum of Aurora's energy vibrating in the walls and faintly illuminating the reinforced doors ahead. Standing in the dim light was Olivier, a shadowy figure radiating power and purpose. Her posture was poised yet tense, her blade held loosely at her side, its polished surface catching the faint glimmers of light from the chaotic energy that surged within the core. Minoru stood across from her, his battered armor bearing the scars of his relentless assault on the cult. At just 17, he looked out of place amidst the high-tech chaos, a lone figure wielding rudimentary weapons in the heart of a shadowy empire. But his eyes told a different story. They burned with the conviction of someone who had seen too much and lost even more. Olivier's gaze locked onto his, her expression inscrutable. The flickering energy of the core cast faint shadows on her face, revealing a mix of exhaustion and something else, something unspoken, clawing at the edges of her thoughts. "You're persistent, I'll give you that," she said, her voice low and steady. "Most would have turned back long before now. But here you are, at the heart of it all." Minoru didn't flinch. "And here you are, guarding it. Why, Olivier? Why stand by this machine? This cult? What do they mean to you?" Olivier's grip on her blade tightened slightly, though her expression remained calm. "They mean order. They mean purpose. The cult isn't perfect, but it's necessary. The world, the people out there, they can't handle chaos. They need someone to guide them, to control the things they don't understand. Minoru scoffed. You call this control? I've seen what the cult does, Olivier. You're not guiding anyone, you're destroying lives, ripping apart families, all for what? Power? Her jaw tensed, and for a moment, a flicker of doubt crossed her face. You don't know what it's like, she said quietly. To carry something inside you that you can't explain. Something that twists your memories, your thoughts, your very sense of self. It's like a curse. Minoru narrowed his eyes, stepping closer. Aurora, he said, testing the name. Olivier flinched almost imperceptibly, her gaze sharpening. Don't say that name. Why not? He pressed, his tone firm but curious. Because it reminds you of what's happening to you? Of who you might have been before all this. She shook her head, the movement sharp and almost defensive. Aurora's nothing but a shadow, a whisper of something that should have stayed buried. Whatever she was, whatever she did, it's irrelevant. I'm still me. I'm still in control. Are you? Minoru asked, his voice softer now. Because from where I'm standing, you don't look so sure. For a moment, the room fell silent save for the hum of the core. Olivier's gaze wavered, her grip on her blade faltering slightly before she steadied herself. It doesn't matter, she said finally. The cult's cause is what matters. Order. Stability. That's why I fight. That's why I'm here. Minoru tilted his head, studying her. And yet, you don't sound so convinced anymore. What's changing, Olivier? What are you afraid of? Her eyes snapped back to his, a spark of anger flaring within them. I'm not afraid, she snapped. Not of you, not of the cult, and not of whatever thing is clawing at my mind. I know my purpose. Do you know yours? Minoru's expression hardened. I know exactly what I'm here to do. To stop the cult. To end this madness before it destroys more lives. And then what? She countered, her voice sharp. What happens when you destroy the only thing keeping the chaos in check? What happens when you realize that you've replaced one kind of destruction with another? Minoru hesitated, her words striking a chord he hadn't expected. But he shook his head, pushing the doubt aside. We'll figure that out when the time comes. But right now this ends. Olivier smirked faintly, though there was no humor in it. You're confident. I'll give you that. But confidence won't save you from what's coming. As she spoke, Minoru felt it again, that strange, subtle warmth coursing through his veins. His battered body, bruised and bloodied from the infiltration, felt lighter, stronger, as though something unseen was mending him from within. He didn't understand it, but he didn't have time to dwell on it either. Olivier straightened, her blade humming to life with an audible crackle of energy. Did you really think you could destroy all this without facing me? Olivier called out, spinning her knife casually in one hand. You've been a thorn for far too long, Kageno. Minoru's grip tightened on his baton, his stance lowering as he prepared for the inevitable. The core's energy pulsed around them, growing more erratic as the resonance between them deepened. As the first sparks of their imminent battle filled the air, Minoru locked eyes with Olivier, his expression unyielding. Let's finish this. I'll give you one chance, Kageno, Olivier said, her voice low and deadly. Turn around and leave. Walk away from this place and never look back. Never talk of the cult and we'll let you live. You've caused enough damage, but it's not too late to disappear. You're resourceful, I'll give you that. But you're not unstoppable. Keep going and you'll find that out the hard way. Minoru didn't flinch. I'm not the one who needs to turn back, he replied. You and your cult are playing with forces you can't control. It's going to end, one way or another. And if you think I'm walking away while there's still a chance to stop you, you're more delusional than I thought. Olivier sighed, almost as if she were disappointed, but the smirk, the gleam in her eyes at the challenge told a different story. So be it, she murmured. Her blade reflected onto her, casting harsh shadows across her face. You've made your choice, dead man. And I've made mine. She shook her head as if tossing out an unnecessary mercy. Enough talk, she finished, her tone final. If you're so sure of your purpose, then prove it. Let's see if your resolve is as strong as your words. The room fell silent, the air between them charged with anticipation. The confrontation that had been building for so long was about to erupt. But for now they stood there, two opposing forces locked in a battle of wills, the core humming ominously behind Olivier like a heartbeat counting down to chaos. The core chamber stretched out before them like a cathedral of destruction. Energy cascaded from the massive crystalline heart at its center, bathing the room in an eerie blue light. The hum of power was deafening, vibrating in Minoru's chest like a drumbeat of inevitability. Olivier stood at the far end, her eyes sharp, a smirk playing at her lips. Her battle armor, an amalgamation of cult technology and her own custom enhancements, started to gleam under the unnatural glow, a sign that her armor would help her in some way. Before he could react, a helmet shimmered and fit around Olivier's head, a clear visor in front of her eyes. Her armor completed, the gleam intensified. Minoru remained silent, gripping his baton tightly. The rudimentary armor, crafted from both normal and cult materials he pieced together, was holding up, but he could feel its limits approaching. The resonance between them was palpable, a pulsing thread tying them together. He rolled his shoulders, flexing his magnetic boots one last time. The fight began in earnest. Olivier moved first, a blur of speed as her knife aimed straight for his throat. Minoru sidestepped, narrowly avoiding the blade, and countered with a quick swing of his baton. Sparks flew as their weapons collided, the sound echoing through the chamber. She followed up with a flurry of attacks, her knife moving like a serpent. Minoru blocked and dodged, his armor absorbing glancing blows, though each strike pushed him back closer to the core. "You've gotten better," Olivier said, her voice cold as her knife grazed his side, slicing through one of his leather layers. Minoru gritted his teeth, pivoting on his magnetic boots to deliver a spinning strike. The baton struck Olivier's shoulder, forcing her back, but she recovered quickly, retaliating with a sweeping kick that sent him sprawling. The resonance flared with each impact, purple tendrils of energy rippling through the chamber. The walls, lined with runes carved by the cult, began to glow faintly in response. Minoru scrambled to his feet, activating the magnetic boots to slide along the metal floor and close the distance. He feinted with his baton, drawing her knife upward, and landed a hard punch to her ribs. Olivier grunted, staggering, but she used the momentum to flip backward, her knife slicing through the air in a deadly arc. The blade connected with one of the magnetic boots, severing its wiring. The boots sputtered and died, leaving Minoru without his greatest mobility advantage. "That's one trick gone," Olivier sneered, pressing her advantage. Minoru ducked under her next strike, using his crowbar to parry her knife. The sound of clashing metal reverberated through the room as the two fought in close quarters, neither giving an inch. Minoru aimed a knee at her abdomen, but Olivier caught it with her free hand, twisting and throwing him across the chamber. He crashed into a console, the impact jarring his arm and leaving him breathless. Minoru rose shakily, blood trickling from a cut on his forehead. Olivier was relentless, her knife a blur as she closed the distance again. Her blade found a gap in his armor, cutting into his shoulder. He roared in pain, using the moment to bring his baton down on her forearm. The impact disarmed her, the knife skittering across the floor. But Olivier didn't falter. She tackled him, driving him into the wall, her gauntlet fists pounding into his chest. The crude armor absorbed some of the blows, but Minoru felt the bruises forming with each hit. Her fists were reinforced with her armor's enhancements, giving some punch, as he saw dents start to form in his chest plate. With a desperate surge of strength, he grabbed her arm and twisted, forcing her back. His baton crackled to life, delivering a powerful electric shock that sent her stumbling backwards a distance. The core, glowing rapidly with each strike, each blow connected, started to glow stronger and stronger, its resonance waving outward, shaking the chamber. Cracks formed in the walls and the runes glowed brighter, pulsing like a heartbeat. The core behind them began to pulse erratically, its energy feeding into the growing chaos. The runes on the walls flared, beams of energy lancing out randomly, obliterating everything they touched. Olivier retrieved her knife, now visibly charged with the resonance. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" she said, her voice tinged with awe and a hint of revered terror. "Aurora's curse." Minoru didn't respond. He focused, his mind racing as he assessed his limited options. Olivier attacked again, her strikes faster and more brutal than before. Minoru parried, but each block sent shocks of pain through his arms. He retaliated with a brutal swing of his crowbar, denting her armor and forcing her back. The fight became a brutal exchange of blows. Olivier landed a devastating kick to Minoru's ribs, cracking his armor and sending him to one knee. He responded by hurling his crowbar, the makeshift weapon striking her in the helmet and shattering her visor. She ripped the helmet off, blood streaming from a cut above her eye. "You're persistent. I'll give you that." Their first round ended in a draw. Minoru and Olivier stood apart, each catching their breath as the chaos of the collapsing structure raged around them. The fight had been brutal, a dance of relentless strikes and counters, but neither had gained the upper hand. Minoru's crowbar was wearing down, while Olivier's armor bore cracks that started to spark and fizzle out. Minoru noted that even without the armor being 100% ready to aid, Olivier was fast, to the point where he wondered if the armor she wore did anything to accelerate her natural speed. Their eyes met across the smoldering debris, neither willing to back down. For a brief moment, there was silence between them, a fragile truce forged in exhaustion and an unspoken acknowledgement of the other's strength. Then, as the walls trembled and the distant roar of the core's instability grew louder, Olivier raised her blade once more, signaling that their battle was far from over. Round 2 start. The second round beginning, Olivier once more moved first, her blade arcing through the air in a flash of energy, aided by her gauntlets this time, pouring energy into them. Minoru sidestepped instinctively, his movements swift and precise despite the weight of his armor. The strike missed by mere inches, but the energy trailing behind the blade sizzled against his shoulder plate, leaving a faint scorch mark. The engineer in him was impressed. He really needed to know how to transfer energy from one medium to another if they weren't wired like his gloves to his old suit. His gloves could emit electricity to launch devastating shocking punches, but they needed to be connected to the suit's power supply to make it happen. The cult somehow found a way to store energy in one medium to transfer energy over to another, in this case her knife. Oh wait, Olivier was saying something. Quick, she muttered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the core. But not quick enough. Minoru didn't respond with words. Instead, he lunged forward, closing the distance between them with surprising speed. His baton swung in a calculated arc, aimed for her dominant arm. Olivier deflected it with her blade, the force of the impact sending a sharp jolt up both their arms. You're good, Minoru admitted, taking a quick step back to reassess. But I fought better. He taunted, starting to love the fight between them. Olivier's lips curled into a faint smirk, though her eyes remained cold. Is that what you tell yourself to feel brave? She pressed the attack, her strikes coming faster now, each one precise and deadly. Minoru dodged and parried as best he could, his baton and crowbar working in tandem to deflect her blows. The clash of their weapons echoed through the chamber, sparks flying with each collision. Despite his best efforts, Olivier's blade found its mark, slicing up through the straps of his chest plate. The piece of armor clattered to the ground, leaving him more vulnerable. An after-image of the blade cut his lip. Remarkable. Sloppy, she remarked, her tone taunting. You're unpolished, Minoru. Strong but reckless. Minoru wiped a trickle of blood from his lip, his expression hardening. Reckless gets the job done. He activated the EMP charge in his baton, swinging it in a feint before slamming it into her gauntlet. The surge of energy crackled along her arm, forcing her to drop her weapon momentarily. Taking the opening, Minoru went on the offensive, his strikes aimed at her exposed sides. Olivier reacted quickly, rolling to the side and reclaiming her weapon in one fluid motion. That trick won't work twice, she warned, though there was a faint tremor in her voice. Their fight continued, each exchange growing more intense. Minoru's gear, though improved during his infiltration, was starting to show signs of wear. His crowbar was dented, his remaining armor scratched and battered. Yet his movements remained sharp, fueled by a determination Olivier couldn't ignore. She, on the other hand, fought with an almost primal ferocity, her blade slicing through the air with deadly precision. But there was something in her eyes, a flicker of uncertainty, of conflict. It was as though every strike was a battle not just against Minoru but against something within herself. As their weapons clashed once more, Minoru caught her gaze and spoke between breaths. You're hesitating, Olivier. Why? I'm not, she snapped, though her voice lacked its usual conviction. Yes, you are, he pressed, stepping back to create some distance. Something's changing in you. Aurora's energy, it's affecting you, isn't it? Was Aurora's energy somehow causing Olivier to question her loyalty to the cult? Her grip on her blade tightened, her knuckles turning white. Shut up. A gamble he had to try. Fee was right. You're fighting for something you don't even believe in anymore, he played his plan, his voice steady despite his exhaustion. You don't have to do this, Olivier. You don't have to keep fighting for them. Don't tell me what I have to do, she shouted, her voice cracking. Success. She's distracted now. She charged at him again, her strikes fueled by raw emotion rather than precision. Minoru dodged and parried, his movements deliberate as he tried to wear her down. But then it happened. The resonance between them spiked, a wave of energy radiating outward and causing the core to pulse erratically. The lights flickered and the ground beneath them trembled. What the hell was that? Minoru muttered, glancing at the core. Olivier's breathing was heavy, her stance faltering. You feel it too, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The energy, it's connecting us. Minoru's expression hardened. This isn't just about the core, is it? Aurora's energy, it's tying us together somehow. She didn't respond, her gaze fixed on him with a mix of fear and defiance. The ground trembled again, cracks forming in the walls as the core's energy surged. The room was becoming increasingly unstable, the chaotic resonance threatening to tear it apart. Olivier straightened, raising her blade once more. It doesn't matter, she said, though her voice lacked its usual steel. I'll end this here. One way or another. Minoru tightened his grip on his weapons, his determination unwavering. Then let's finish it. As they squared off once more, the core pulsed with a blinding light, the unstable energy reaching a critical point. Their final clash was imminent, the fate of the cult, and perhaps themselves, hanging in the balance. The second round was over, but there was no respite this time. The chamber erupted into chaos as Minoru and Olivier clashed with renewed fury. Sparks flew from their weapons, lighting up the darkened room with bursts of energy as the unstable core continued to pulse in the background. Olivier struck first, her blade carving through the air with a high-pitched hum. Minoru ducked low, his crowbar spinning in a counterstrike that forced her to sidestep. Without missing a beat, she spun on her heel and slashed horizontally, the tip of her blade grazing his armor and drawing a thin line of blood on his side. Minoru gritted his teeth but pressed forward, his baton crackling to life as he swung it in a calculated arc. The EMP charge struck her breastplate, sending a ripple of electricity across her torso. Olivier staggered, but she recovered with alarming speed, her blade slashing upward in a retaliatory strike. The tip of the blade nicked his visor, cracking it slightly. His vision blurred for a moment, but he adjusted quickly, rolling backward to create some distance. You're relentless, Minoru muttered, wiping blood from his lip. Olivier smirked, though her expression was strained. And you're persistent. I'll give you that. She lunged again, her movements a blur as she unleashed a flurry of strikes. Minoru parried as best he could, his crowbar and baton working in tandem to deflect her attacks. But she was faster, her blade weaving through his defenses and scoring shallow cuts on his arms and legs. You can't keep up, she taunted, her voice filled with confidence. Minoru didn't respond. Instead, he ducked under a particularly vicious swing and drove his crowbar into the joint of her armor at her elbow. The impact forced her to drop her blade momentarily, and he seized the opportunity, striking her gauntlet with his baton to disable it further. Olivier hissed in frustration, her movements becoming more erratic as she fought to regain control. You fight like a beast in a cage, Minoru said, his voice calm despite his labored breathing. What's driving you, Olivier? Is it the cult? Or something else? Shut up, she roared, her voice echoing through the chamber. She tackled him, her shoulders slamming into his chest and sending them both tumbling to the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of him, but he reacted quickly, driving his knee into her stomach to force her off. They scrambled to their feet simultaneously, their weapons raised once more, Olivier recovering her blade. You're desperate, Minoru observed, his voice steady despite the pain coursing through his body. You're fighting like you have nothing left to lose. Olivier's eyes flashed with anger, but there was something else there, something vulnerable. What would you know about losing everything? Minoru didn't answer. Instead, he advanced, his strikes more precise now as he aimed for the weak points in her armor. He could feel his body regenerating slowly, the wounds he'd sustained earlier closing as if by some unseen force. Olivier noticed it too. Her eyes narrowed as she parried his attacks, her blade moving faster now as if to counteract his recovery. You're healing, she said, her tone accusatory. Aurora's energy, it's inside you too. It does something different. And it's inside you, Minoru observed, his baton striking her breastplate with a resounding crack. The force of the blow sent her stumbling, but she recovered quickly, her blade slashing upward in a desperate arc. The strike caught him in the leg, slicing through his armor and drawing blood. Minoru hissed in pain but didn't falter. He swung his crowbar with all his strength, the metal colliding with her gauntlet and finally cracking it to the point where it lost its glowing and enhancing properties. The resulting force pushed Olivier back to where the glow of the core was strongest. In the glow of the core, her face was revealed, sweat slicked and flushed with exertion. Her eyes burned with fury, but there was a flicker of doubt in them, doubt that Minoru latched onto. You're fighting me, he said, his voice low. But you're really fighting yourself, aren't you? Olivier growled, her blade cutting through the air in a wild swing that Minoru barely dodged. The ground beneath them trembled as the core's energy surged, cracks forming in the walls as the unstable power reached critical levels. "You won't win," she said, her voice strained but defiant. "No matter what happens here, the cult will endure." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Minoru retorted. He feinted with his baton before driving his crowbar into the ground, using it as leverage to kick her blade out of her hands. The weapon clattered to the floor, and he pressed his advantage, striking her in the chest armor with a powerful blow from his baton. Olivier staggered backward, her arms hanging limply at her sides as she struggled to catch her breath. But before Minoru could capitalize on his advantage, the core pulsed with a blinding light, the energy within it resonating with both of them. The chamber shook violently, pieces of debris falling from the ceiling as the unstable power threatened to tear the room apart. "What's happening?" Olivier asked, her voice tinged with genuine fear. Minoru didn't answer. He was too focused on the core, the light from its unstable energy reflecting in his visor. "We end this now," she said, her voice resolute despite the chaos around them. She charged at him, her fists raised as if to fight him bare-handed. Minoru met her head-on, his baton and crowbar swinging in a blur of motion as they clashed in the center of the chamber. Amazingly, whatever boon Aurora's energy granted Olivier made her fists as hard as steel. She met his crowbar and baton head-on and she did not even flinch from the blow. In fact, her hands were wrapped in some energy that protected her from harm. What the hells was Aurora's energy made from? It defied all science. Each blow they exchanged sent shockwaves through the room, the resonance between them growing stronger with every strike. The core pulsed faster now, its light almost blinding as the energy reached critical mass. Their fight was no longer just about victory, it was about survival. And neither of them was willing to back down. The chamber became a battlefield of pure chaos, the core's pulsating energy surging through the air in waves, bathing the two combatants in its radiance. Minoru and Olivier were locked in a ferocious duel, their movements a blur as they exchanged blows with a determination that bordered on madness. Every swing of Minoru's baton was met with Olivier's parries, her lithe frame moving with inhuman grace as she struck back with fists reinforced by her armor's technology. Sparks flew as metal met energy, the sound echoing through the crumbling chamber. The core pulsed again, brighter this time, the light seeping into their wounds. Cuts sealed themselves, bruises faded, and fatigue evaporated as their bodies unconsciously absorbed the energy. But neither noticed. Their focus remained locked solely on one another, their battle a relentless, primal clash of will and skill. "You fight well," Olivier spat, her voice strained but tinged with grudging respect. "But you're just a boy playing at being a shadow." Minoru grunted as he dodged her rapid strikes, her speed increasing with every pulse of the core. He countered with a sweeping kick, catching her off guard and sending her skidding across the floor. "I don't play," Minoru replied, his voice calm despite the fire in his eyes. "This is who I am." He lunged forward, baton crackling with energy as he brought it down toward her chest. Olivier rolled to the side just in time, the blow striking the floor and leaving a scorch mark. "You're delusional," she said, rising to her feet. Her fists glowed faintly with energy, the core's power now manifesting in her strikes. She launched a punch that collided with Minoru's remaining layer of armor, denting it and sending him stumbling backward. Minoru caught himself, his breathing steady despite the impact. He adjusted his stance, his crowbar and baton held at the ready. "And you're blind. The cult is using you." Olivier snarled, charging at him with renewed fury. Her strikes came faster now, her fists moving in a flurry that forced Minoru onto the defensive. He blocked and dodged as best he could, his body moving on instinct as his mind calculated his next move. The core pulsed again, its energy now crackling visibly in the air. Both combatants felt the surge but remained oblivious to its effects on their bodies. Their wounds healed faster, their movements became sharper, and their strength grew with each passing second. Olivier landed a solid hit, her fist slamming into Minoru's ribs and sending him sprawling. She advanced, her expression a mix of determination and something deeper, desperation. "You can't win," she said, her voice a harsh whisper. "I've given everything for this cause. You're just a distraction, a footnote in history." Minoru rolled to his feet, his crowbar swinging upward in a wide arc that forced her to leap back. He straightened, his visor cracked but still functional, his eyes locked on hers. "If I'm a footnote," he said, his tone unwavering, "then I'll make sure this chapter ends with your cult in ruins." Their clash resumed, the room trembling with each strike. The core's light intensified, its pulsations becoming erratic. Debris fell from the ceiling and the walls began to crack under the strain. Minoru saw his opening. As Olivier lunged for another strike, he sidestepped, driving his baton into the exposed joint of her armor. The EMP charge surged through her body, momentarily stunning her. She fell to one knee, her breathing ragged as she glared up at him. But even as she faltered, the core's energy pulsed again, revitalizing her. She rose with a snarl, her fists glowing brighter now, her strikes becoming almost feral. Minoru matched her intensity, his weapons moving in a deadly dance as he pressed his advantage. The two were evenly matched, their battle a testament to their skill and determination. Finally, Minoru saw his moment. As Olivier overextended on a swing, he sidestepped and brought his crowbar down in a crushing blow to her shoulder, shattering the armor and forcing her to drop to one knee again, gripping her broken shoulder. But before he could press his advantage, the core emitted a deafening roar, its energy spiraling out of control. The chamber shook violently, the unstable power threatening to consume everything. Both combatants froze, their attention momentarily drawn to the core as it pulsed with a blinding light. "This isn't over," Olivier said, her voice low but resolute. Minoru nodded, his grip tightening on his weapons. "No, it's just beginning." The core's energy reached its peak, the chamber erupting in a cataclysmic explosion of light and sound. The blast engulfed them both, the fate of Minoru and Olivier left uncertain as the cult's base crumbled into chaos and destruction. As the battle raged on and finished, what were the thoughts of those around them? Cult operatives. The first tremors went unnoticed by most, masked by the constant cacophony of alarms and shouting as personnel scrambled to deal with the chaos Minoru had unleashed. But when the walls began to crack and the ground quaked violently, panic erupted. Guards sprinted through the dimly lit hallways, their weapons clutched tightly as debris rained down from above. "Evacuate. Get to the surface," one officer bellowed, his voice barely audible over the roaring collapse. Many obeyed, but others hesitated, unwilling to abandon their posts or experiments. In one laboratory, a young scientist stared in horror as the core's destabilization sent surges of energy through the walls, frying equipment and shattering glass. "The readings, this isn't just an overload. It's catastrophic," she screamed. Her older colleague grabbed her arm, dragging her away as the floor beneath them began to crack. Soldiers in the barracks grabbed what they could, abandoning half-dressed comrades in their desperation to reach the exit. Some froze, paralyzed by the realization that they might not make it out alive. Elite operatives from the high-level barracks moved with precision, their faces stoic despite the chaos. They coordinated evacuation efforts, directing personnel to the remaining escape routes. But even they couldn't mask their growing unease as the entire structure groaned under the strain of imminent collapse. Elder Council. The council chamber was in disarray, the once composed leaders now shouting over one another as their plans unraveled. "This is impossible. Our base is impenetrable," one elder cried, slamming his fist against the table. Another glared at him, his voice trembling with anger. "Impenetrable until we underestimated him. That boy, he's not just some rogue agent. He's a harbinger of our destruction." "Silence," barked the eldest among them, his voice cutting through the cacophony. "We still have contingencies. Activate the emergency lifts to the subterranean floors. If we lose this base, we will rebuild." But even as they issued orders, the lights flickered and died, leaving them bathed in the eerie glow of the emergency beacons. The sound of the core's destabilization grew louder, a harbinger of their impending doom. "We don't have time," one council member yelled as a massive crack split the chamber wall. The elders scrambled for the hidden elevator leading to their escape, but not all of them made it. A support beam gave way, crushing 2 council members beneath tons of rubble. The survivors barely reached the elevator as the room collapsed around them. "Cut it." Akane sat hunched over her computer, her fingers gripping the edge of the desk as she watched the data feed from Umbra 03. Her heart raced as she deciphered the maps and schematics, hoping that her efforts could somehow help him from afar. The dot named Minoru was moving way too erratic for her tastes, a second dot clashing with it in equal fervor. Then the 2 dots stopped. Then the screen flickered. The screen shut down. "No, no, no, no," she muttered, her voice rising in panic. The connection to the base and to Minoru cut out entirely, leaving her staring at an error message. Her breath caught in her throat and she felt tears welling up. "He's fine," she whispered to herself, gripping the edge of the desk until her knuckles turned white. "He has to be fine." but the silence that followed was deafening. She tried to re-establish the connection, her hands trembling, but nothing worked. She buried her face in her hands, fear and helplessness washing over her. "Please," she murmured. "Come back." Survivors. The cult's personnel who managed to escape stumbled out into the open air, their faces pale and their bodies covered in dust and debris. Some carried injured comrades, others simply collapsed to their knees, gasping for breath. From a distance, they could see the massive structure of the base trembling, its once imposing frame now crumbling in on itself. Explosions rippled through the ground, sending plumes of smoke and fire into the air. Among the survivors, a young technician wept openly, clutching a piece of broken equipment. "We built this place to last a century," she said through sobs. "And it's gone in a day." One of the elite operatives turned to her, his face grim. "It wasn't the base that failed. It was us. We underestimated him." As the final explosion rocked the earth, the survivors could only watch in stunned silence. The cult's stronghold, a symbol of their power and dominance, was no more. Final moments of the base. The core pulsed one last time, its light so intense it turned night into day. Then, with a deafening roar, it detonated. The shockwave leveled the remaining structures, scattering debris for miles and leaving nothing but a smoking crater where the base once stood. The cult's operatives, scientists, and leaders were scattered, their organization left in disarray. But amidst the devastation, no one could say what had become of the boy who had brought their empire to its knees, or the woman who had guarded its core. Olivier's thoughts. As the swirling energy of the core began to consume her, Olivier felt both pain and exhilaration, her body alive with a power she couldn't control. The remnants of Aurora's influence clawed at her mind, distorting memories and forcing foreign thoughts to collide with her own. Was she Olivier, the loyal guardian of the cult, or something else entirely, a vessel for a force she never truly understood? Her faith wavered as her resolve strengthened. The cult's doctrine seemed so distant, almost laughable now. All that mattered was the fight, the clash of wills that had defined her existence. She thought of Minoru, not as an enemy but as a force, an equal, a reflection of her fractured self. If this was to be her end, she would accept it, so long as it was on her terms, blades clashing against a worthy foe. Minoru's thoughts. The raw energy seared through Minoru, threatening to pull him apart, but it also felt oddly familiar, as if it recognized him. Memories of Akane, of his world, and of the life he'd built and lost raced through his mind. Yet in this moment, his focus narrowed to Olivier, his rival, his mirror, someone bound to him by forces neither of them fully understood. He admired her tenacity even as he fought to overcome her. He wondered briefly if this was what he had always wanted. A battle that pushed him beyond his limits, an adversary who challenged not just his skill but his very essence. Despite the chaos around him, there was no fear, only determination. If he could rise from this, he would do so as someone stronger, someone closer to becoming the shadowy force he aspired to be. But as the energy surged, he wasn't certain if this would be his rebirth or his undoing. Now what? And that's it for today. I hope you enjoyed. Support the writer. Don't forget to like, sub, share, and donate for more videos.